Welcome to Healthy Leagues, the one-stop podcast that bridges the gap between small to mid-sized businesses and digital marketing. In this interconnected age of the internet and artificial intelligence, if you are looking to increase your online lead flow and close deals, or just someone interested in the fusion of business growth and digital marketing, this podcast is your avenue for success. Now let's get to our host, Brian Atkinson.
Welcome everyone to the Healthy Leads podcast brought to you by Ellington Digital. Today we have an interview, our first interview with Laura Wayman, an author, speaker, and expert on being a dementia care educator. She is known as the Dementia Whisperer. She is a best-selling author and an internationally renowned speaker. Welcome, Laura. Super excited to have you on the podcast today. Thank you for being here.
I am so honored to be here to speak with you about this so important. It's everybody's favorite topic about dementia, right?
Yes. And you're going to be the perfect person to talk with us about that because you started your firm, the Dementia Whisperer, in 2007, 15, 16 years now. So you're an expert in this area. Take me back to 2007 though. Like what called you to start this and become such a specialist in the space?
Well, we have to go way back, Ryan, way back in my life. And so I do have a degree in gerontology, but I will tell you that all my experience surrounding dementia care and that subject came way before that. So it's more of a bit of a personal journey. So I want to tell you a personal story about a young woman by the name of Peggy. Now, Peggy grew up in this very rural farming community. She's a very shy girl.
Yeah.
And there were ranchers and farmers she was surrounded with that would spend their days from sunrise to sunset working on their properties, and they rarely socialized except with family. So they all in this area decided that they really needed to build their community to get to know their neighbors. Yep. So they began to have these square dances once a month, and they would all talk about it and get together and really just let their hair down and party at this good old-fashioned hoedown. And everybody looked forward to it except for Peggy. She was a very shy 17-year-old girl who would rather sit at home and read a book. And so her girlfriends decided, you need to get out. So they got her all gussied up and they pushed her into the square dance hall on this particular night. Yeah. And there happened to be a guest square dance caller there, a young man from one of these other areas that Peggy had never met. And when her girlfriends pushed her into this square dance hall, she looked up, saw Jack. Oh my goodness, she turned to them and said, that man is so handsome, I'm going to marry that man. And they all laughed at her because she was so shy, but she went up and introduced herself. And before the end of that square dance, Jack asked Peggy out on their first date. And you know, Ryan, they dated over the next year, decided they were true soulmates. And so on Peggy's 18th birthday, Jack and Peggy eloped. Now, They had a long, magical, wonderful life together. They had, at the very beginning of their marriage, they had 5 healthy babies. Boom, 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 boom. And Peggy so loved caring for those babies and those children that she also invited foster children into her home because she was one of those people that was just a true caregiver at heart.
Yeah.
And so she helped to raise not only her own 5 healthy children, she helped to raise and care for over 20 foster children throughout her life.
Wow.
And many of those foster children had special care needs. So she was, like I said, one of those people that just knew how to care for individuals and knew how to find the right way with the right care approach and the right resources. And she did that all on her own and successfully raised all of these children, young adults. They began to turn into young adults and began to leave the home. Yeah. And Jack and Peggy were, over all these years of caring for kids, they were suddenly going to be faced with being empty nesters, and they could start to plan their retirement dream lifestyle. So when that last adult child left the home, they sold their house, bought an RV, and began to travel all over the country. They couldn't do that while they were raising all those kids. But unfortunately, Ryan, by now, after this long, wonderful married life together, now they were older. And so it wasn't long after they hit the road to live this dream that Jack's health began to fail.
No, no.
And so Peggy was dealing with that on the road. First of all, Jack began to have sight impairment because he had macular degeneration. So all the driving fell on Peggy, but that wasn't her biggest concern. Ryan, her biggest concern was that after all of these years, Jack began to show signs and symptoms of dementia. And Peggy knew this was going to be a game changer in their dream. So she gathered Jack up as he continued to show more and more of these symptoms, took him to their family physician, and they received the devastating diagnosis that indeed Jack had Alzheimer's as the cause of his dementia symptoms. Now, Peggy knew there was no cure. She also had seen many of her friends dealing with loved ones, parents, spouses, even neighbors who were on a dementia care journey or had been, and she knew this was difficult and challenging, and that she was really going to have to commit to this. And so she also knew they had to change their lifestyle. She couldn't give him competent care on the road. No. So they bought a little house in a small town next to some friends of theirs, and she stepped back into that 100% because that's who she was with all of her heart. And at first she was doing okay, but Jack continued to decline. As with Alzheimer's, it's progressive loss. So he continued to have more and more symptoms. And not too long after they had made this decision and she stepped into this role, she was really beginning to be challenged on her own with all of this. And she looked around and went, oh my gosh, I made a mistake here. I isolated ourselves in this little town, in this lovely little house, because I don't have any family that can come and help me. They're all long distance. And so she really realized, even though it was difficult, she was on her own. There was no professionals trained, like we're going to talk about memory care communities. There was nothing like that in this little town. No in-home care. She was really on her own. And even if she took Jack to the doctor, if she could get him there, because he resisted trying to go out or anything like that, that was always a challenge. But if she did get him to the doctor came in for 5-10 minutes, listened to his heart, took his blood pressure, said, yep, he's got dementia, and sent her home with no resources. And there was nothing medically. There's no magic pill, no treatment. And so she really started to have that heavy weight on her shoulders that she was all alone. Now, she looked around. She knew that, it's getting more and more difficult. So she decided, okay, I'll get some emotional support from my family. That's what I'll do. I'll start calling them on the phone and share with them some of my challenges. So that's what she did. And quite honestly, the family was surprised, Ryan. They had always seen her as that person that could figure everything out, what was going on. And they, of course, had no idea how challenging this was. They were around anybody who had been through this challenge, like the millions of other caregivers out there on their own. So they listened to her, but they were quite surprised and shocked that she was so challenged, especially when she began to really say what was happening, talking about these dementia symptoms that were so difficult. For example, now Jack was wandering. So she couldn't take her eyes off of him for a minute, or he was out the door and down the road. She even had to call the police to come and help her a couple times to fetch him and bring him home. And he wasn't sleeping at night, Ryan. And so Peggy was up and down all night long. She literally had to sleep with one eye open because he needed constant supervision.
Oh, wow.
And he began to be challenged, as with these dementia symptoms we're going to talk about, even processing familiar information that was on almost autopilot in his brain. Now she would enter the room and he wouldn't recognize her.
Oh, no.
And would become extremely agitated because he believed she was a stranger in their own home.
Oh, no.
And this was his beautiful bride of all these years. And so as she was sharing that with the family said, well, why don't you get some help? And she said, well, there isn't any here. It's just me. My neighbors are all older. They really can't help me. This is really a lot. So the family would say, well, we'll move back. And no matter where they were in their life, they would offer to move back and leave their education or their careers or whatever. And, she would always resist. She would always say, no, I'm not ready to interfere with your life. Jack and I promised you that we would take care of each other.
Yeah.
If it gets to be where I need that, I will alert you. Then one night, Ryan, Jack and Peggy were home alone. Peggy had made Jack a wonderful dinner like she always did. But as she sat down to have dinner with Jack, Peggy suffered a massive heart attack. Now, Jack's dementia was so far advanced, he did not recognize she needed any kind of emergency help. In his confusion, he kind of wandered outside and said something very concerning to a passing neighbor that Peggy was tired and she was sleeping on the floor. So by the time help arrived, Ryan, Peggy was gone.
Oh
Peggy,
my God.
Peggy was my mother.
Oh no.
That's how I got to where I am. Even though I had a degree in gerontology and had studied aging, and we had studied dementia, I did not realize the ultimate toll that these caregivers sacrifice. They self-sacrifice to care for their loved one. And that person may need care anywhere from 2 to 20 years, depending on the cause and the progression of the loss. And 68% of the time, if we don't get to those caregivers, 68% of the time, especially a same-age spouse, they will get sick and go first. They are that silent patient because this is so extreme. So when we talk about dementia care, that's what I'm talking about, becoming dementia aware and understanding how challenging and the different layers there is to dementia care and how we must educate, help these caregivers become dementia aware so that they learn they must build their village. They must ask for help. They cannot do this safely alone.
And that's an incredible story. That's like an incredibly over the top story. So thank you for sharing that, for one, for being so vulnerable to share that. I want to talk about like those layers of dementia care. Can you tell us how many layers there are, and can you kind of peel back each one there?
And that's the challenge because let's just take my mother, for example.
Yeah.
She was in a little small town that had a lot of seniors, but did not have a lot of resources that were familiar, that were dementia aware, right? Mm-hmm. And so on that note, she didn't have these different layers, but now we've attempted over the last 25 years to build those layers, but most of the time, those families want to keep their loved one at home, and that loved one wants to stay at home. Yeah. But unfortunately, depending on the progression and what kind of loss they have and the different dementia symptoms that they're presenting, that might not always be the possibility. So we do have to have these different layers. We can have trained in-home care, companion care, but it's confusing for the families to understand because companion care would give the emotional and social support that's necessary, help with things around the house that are non-medical. And that's usually the first step because someone with dementia symptoms generally doesn't need medical or clinical support. Yeah. They need that emotional, social support with helping with activities of daily living, eating, ambulation, toileting, bathing, those kinds of things that are non-medical. So that's kind of the first layer, plus helping to train those family members in a care approach that keeps that person from being constantly anxious and agitated. So the communication and care approach starts with that family member, help them be dementia aware, help them to understand this kind of loss. Then the next step would probably be getting a companion. The other challenge to that is that insurance doesn't pay for that. So that's private pay, and it can be very, very expensive, even though they're not clinically trained. So that's usually the first go-to.
Mm-hmm.
However, then the next go-to, if that person is not, that caregiver is not getting enough sleep because that person is up all night,
Yeah.
they're needing much more supervision, that eyes on supervision, because they might be wandering or and refusing care, because
Yeah.
that's a big challenge, a dementia symptom. Then we might think about placement, or maybe the home is not safe. Maybe their stairs and their ambulation has been affected, which is a common dementia symptom. They begin to be such a big fall risk.
Yeah.
And people are misunderstanding that it's all about memory loss. It's about thousands of other dementia symptoms and brain function loss that is dangerous and can be a safety risk. So maybe it's a 2 or 3 story home, and that's not going to be safe. Or maybe their door opens onto busy traffic and they're exit seeking, and so it's not safe for them to be in the home. Then we have to start thinking about senior care. But when dementia is involved, there's the 3 layers of senior care. There's independent living, which is really just having an apartment with amenities. There's assisted living, which is having an apartment with amenities, but also a little bit of support, some non-medical support.
Yep.
Or there's dementia care, which can be, which would include an apartment or or room that includes dining, and then assisted care. But that assisted care has to be dementia trained, because that care approach has to change from assisted to dementia care. So you can see this gets really complicated because there's these, I'd like to say, on a dementia care journey, there's all these different rest stops, but the loss continues to push you forward. So you don't stay here for very long. You're on to the next one to help support that caregiver.
Yeah, and that's what I want to talk about. I wanted to talk about like the senior living communities, because I know, our audience is going to be interested in how like senior living communities can provide the right training to their caregivers, and specifically how this helps communities market themselves and improve caregiver retention. As you said, this is a lot to deal with, but it also helps you because they can get certified by being dementia aware, certified safe space. So can you talk to us a little bit more about this dementia aware certified safe space?
Sure. When I go and train, Ryan, in a memory care or assisted living, I train everyone in that community, because even though they advertise assisted care, we have to back up and talk about the percentage of those individuals, even in assisted care, that probably are starting to show some dementia symptoms, right? So the statistics say that when we reach the wonderful age of 65 or older, we have a 50% chance of having some cause of dementia symptoms. So we're bringing together, congregating all these seniors that are over the age of 65 in assisted living. And it's interesting, Ryan, when I give that statistic, when I'm training in an assisted living, and I ask the staff, how many, percentage-wise, how many of your assisted living residents, not memory care yet, assisted living, how many of them do you think are exhibiting dementia symptoms? And they often say, I travel all over the United States, and every one of them will say between 75 and 85%. So it is much more prevalent. So therefore, we have to train assisted living staff. And I don't just train the staff, I train the leadership, I train marketing and sales, I train housekeeping, I train facilities, dining, and the care staff, because everyone has to have this unique care approach and communication that is dementia aware, in order for all of those in assisted living, even before they're moved to memory care, have this relief, this quality of life that will be absent if the staff is not properly trained. They will constantly be in this state of chaos and anxiety because they simply cannot, those with dementia symptoms can't understand what is being said to them. And it causes, like I said, this challenge. And so we have to balance that. And then there's still the family members who have to be on the same page, or they come and undermine all the good work of the staff. And then there's the residents that don't have dementia symptoms that also have to have this. So that's why I say my mission as the Dementia Whisperers is to raise dementia awareness worldwide for everyone, and the necessity of why we have to do that.
Yeah. And can you give us like one communication technique that we should keep in mind for the families, for the caregivers, and for like fellow residents? Do you have one for each that you can share?
Absolutely. This is number one is we have to recognize we cannot stop it, fix it, or change it. We can only help them manage the symptoms.
Interesting.
And I like to say just simply that they have, if you're exhibiting dementia symptoms, you have a broken thinker. It's difficult for you to think and process and make sense of the world around you. So we need to think for them. And one of the biggest things we have to stop doing is making them think when we ask questions. Because Ryan, if I ask you a question, what do you have to do? You have to think of an answer. Which a healthy brain can do, right? You think of the question, you think of an answer. How are you today? Well, I'm fine.
Yeah.
If that thinker's not working, that would cause you anxiety. You would be thinking,
oh yeah.
If I said blah, 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 and I'm expecting you to answer, how does that make you feel, Ryan?
Yeah.
You know?
And the dementia patients, they're able to identify like that they're having these feelings of anxious like feelings.
The feelings stay. The feelings don't go away, but they lose the ability to regulate those feelings or even understand why they're feeling that way. And so we have to make sure we understand it's all about how we make them feel. If we're constantly making them anxious, then that's what we're going to get back, right? But if we join their feelings and help to make them feel loved, safe, secure, and valued with our actions and our engagement and our communication, then that's what we're going to get back. We're going to get that cooperation and that sense of trust from them. So that's one of the hardest habits that we have to break. I have to work on that all the time. We think about how many questions we ask somebody. So,
Is it like changing your approach then of like how you ask the question, or like how do you, if you want to like get information out of someone with dementia, like how do you extract that information out of them then?
Well, I practice when I'm doing trainings because I start at the very beginning. I don't ask questions. At the very beginning of a training, I have people filing in. I'm going, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I don't ask them any questions. Then when they first sit down, I say, I would like to get to know you a little bit. So I would really like it if you could share with me your name and your expectations about this presentation. Now, I didn't ask a question, did I?
Yeah.
But it's amazing how when I do that, even with somebody with a healthy brain, the audience, they share with me. They open up. And so then later I ask them, how'd that make you feel? And they said, well, welcome and comfortable sharing. Have you ever been somewhere, Ryan, where people are just asking you questions, peppering, what's your name? What's your birthday? Blah, blah, blah. How does that feel? Even with a healthy brain, it's invasive.
Stop asking me questions.
Please don't ask me a whole lot of questions. But just like you did, Ryan, to help me feel welcome, you introduced me, and there was no questions involved. We were just, and you made me feel welcome. It's like that, but we do it all the time with somebody with dementia symptoms. We stay ahead of them and proactively think for them and manage those feelings that they can no longer manage anymore. I don't even say, how are you? Or what is your name? I'll say, it's so nice to meet you. Or you look so happy today. Or I love your smile. And a little secret, Ryan, this works so well even with people with a healthy brain. So
So, yeah, well, that's what I was going to bring up. So let me give you like an example here. Cause like, to me, this is like asking like a question and like kind of like a directive statement. So like a question to me of like, Laura, how is your day going? Like, that's a question. Like, you wouldn't ask a dementia patient that, correct?
no,
Okay.
because immediately I'm going, how is my day going?
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, and honestly, Ryan, how much of that information do you really want? You
Exactly.
know,
Yeah.
you want me to tell you, oh, I woke up and I was so tired today,
Yeah.
Ryan.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
just,
don't tell me that.
no, no. So if you turn that into what I call a positive action statement and you said, oh, Laura, it looks like you are in such a good mood. It's so nice to see your smile.
Okay.
How would that make me feel?
Yes.
And
Yes. Yeah.
yet I can still answer that. I can still join you with that, but it kind of turns my feelings on edge. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense. Because how I was thinking it is like you're kind of like getting the emotion out of them in a way of like by the questions that you're asking. And this is what you're teaching like the caregivers,
Yep.
the families, and like residents. Is this is how you should approach it?
Yes. And Maya Angelou had a wonderful quote. She said, and I think it's so true just in life,
Yeah.
people will forget what you said and people will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And I
True.
agree with that.
Yeah.
But I turn that into more of a dementia aware version so that we can really think for them, because a individual with dementia symptoms can't always process what you say. And
Yeah.
an individual with dementia symptoms cannot always process what you do. But whatever you say and do will make them feel, and they can no longer regulate or understand those feelings. So be careful what you say and do.
Yeah.
And that is such a foundation to my work.
Mm.
And it takes practice. I
Yeah.
promise you, I do it all the time. I drive my family crazy because I'll ask a question and then I'll be thinking in my head, how can I turn that into a positive action
I love
statement?
that.
And yet you can still get information like we were talking about, because it helps that person, that individual, especially who's suffering with this brain function loss and dementia
Yeah.
symptoms. It helps their brain to relax and it supports what function they still have.
For sure.
So it helps them to feel that feeling of accomplishment because they can engage comfortably. Whereas what our caregivers before they're trained, and they don't mean to do this,
Yeah, they don't
Ryan,
know.
but this is what I hear. I go onto a dementia care floor, wonderful, loving, caring staff that's not yet been trained to be dementia aware. This is what I hear. If you can imagine what this sounds like to that person with a broken thinker, would you like to get up? Good
Yeah.
morning. What would you like to wear? What would you like to eat? Would you
Mhm.
like to come to breakfast? Are you hungry? Would you like to go listen to the music? And, and so there's this phenomenon that often the staff will talk to me about later in the afternoon and evening. There's these big challenges. It's called sundowning.
Okay.
And I will tell the staff, I want you for 48 hours to not ask these residents a single question, all positive action statements. And they will contact me later after I've left and they will say, you know, we did that for 48 hours, Laura, and it's amazing because we saw no sundowning, none of those challenging behaviors. We're accidentally causing these behaviors, trying to communicate with them as if they have a healthy brain, and we're scaring them. We're making them anxious. We're locking that
Yeah.
brain up. And it's like magic, because then I'll go back 2 weeks later, have the opportunity to visit that same memory care, and they're practicing these methods, and it's a completely different feeling.
Yeah.
And those behaviors, although we're not stopping, fixing, or changing them, we're managing them so much better, and everybody is having more feelings of accomplishment. You know, we've thrown our staff out on the floor with no tools.
Yeah.
No
Yeah.
wonder there's such caregiver burnout. And the families as well. Had I had this opportunity, Ryan, to share this information that I've learned over these years with my mom, I could have saved your life. I
Yeah.
honestly believe that.
Yeah, and I think that's like what's so crazy is like the communication technique is just like a little bit different, but it just changes it in so many ways. I think about me and my roommate whenever he comes home from work, it's always like, oh, like, how are you doing? And it's like, oh, like, how am I doing? Like, I have to think about it. But tonight when he comes home, I'm going to say, oh, you look like you're in such a good mood, and see what it goes from there. I love that technique.
Yes, it works. My husband, he came when we were dating, and I had written the book and going about, this was several years ago, going about doing these presentations, and he read the book and he was very excited and he said, I want to come listen to the presentation tonight. I said, oh great, come on. He sat in the back and he listened, and he was pretty quiet on the way back when we left and we were driving back home. He was kind of quiet, and I said, well, what'd you think? And he said, I think you use this on me. And I said, yes, I do. And it works.
I practice what I preach. I love that. I want to talk about becoming dementia aware and how you help these senior living facilities. Can you kind of take us through the steps of like how these communities can be certified?
Absolutely. Now, I can come do just a one-time training, an evening with residents and staff. But what I like to do to help develop a dementia-aware safe space is I come for at least a 2-day intensive workshop. Why? Because that's the only way we can get all the staff trained, because we can't pull them off the floor. They're busy. A lot of times, a lot of these places are working with staff shortages anyway. So I come and I start at 6 o'clock in the morning, and every hour and a half, I'm training different groups. But like I said, I start with leadership. Why? Because it's really kind of a train the trainer idea. After I'm gone, they need to be that foundation, and it's trickling down from the top, right?
Starts at the top.
So I'm training, and after I get at least 75%, but the majority of the time when I come do these 2-day workshops, most of the time I get 95, 100%, but at least 75% of all staff, 2 days, because someone might have Thursday off, but I'm there Friday. So we get everybody in there. We give them the opportunity. Once they've had this basic training, this 90-minute basic training, then they become a certified dementia aware safe space. Now we also do one, at least, training of the family members too, just like I said, and the local community, because first responders are going to be coming in, and they love this training because they are dealing with having to be in front of, on several different calls throughout the day, caregivers who are challenged in the home or in assisted living and memory care communities where someone has fallen. And so first responders, local community, even I've trained members of the Chamber of Commerce in the local community. So that helps to make sure that the entire organization is dementia aware. That's what this wonderful certification provides them, because they have all participants walk away really as dementia experts. They're able to answer the question, what is dementia? They're able to understand from the inside out what is actually going on, and they're able to know how to access resources that are also dementia aware in that whole organization.
Yeah, and I think that's like so important, just because of like there is such a high population that is experiencing dementia early stage or clinically diagnosed, and so it sounds like it's work that's happening at the senior community level, the family level, and just across the community, which is so important.
That's where it's going to start. Individuals to organizations to statewide to nationwide. And, you know, my book, A Loving Approach to Dementia Care, is actually translated and published and a bestseller in Russia.
Wow.
This is a worldwide challenge. And so, you know, my book, getting that out there with all of this information, my training, I'm hitting the ground running, and we must provide the world with this dementia aware safety net, because right now we have no cure. We have no prevention. We have no real medical treatment. And there's thousands and thousands of individuals that are suffering with this.
Yes, I love that. And well, Laura, we'll wrap it up there. And if people are wanting to know more about you, more about how they can be dementia aware certified, where can people contact you? You just mentioned the book, but like, is there a website? Mention the book again. Where can people connect with you?
Okay, my website's easy to remember. It's laurawayman.com. So it's LauraWayman. But if you Google the Dementia Whisperer, which is my trademark name, you'll find my website. It comes up 10 pages of me.
I love that.
My book, A Loving Approach to Dementia Care, is now in its 3rd edition. It's published by Johns Hopkins University Press.
That's amazing.
And it is readily available, Amazon, bookstores, of course, my website, and any organization that is interested in having me come. I travel all over. I just got back from Massachusetts. I have a wonderful organization in a little town, Winchendon, Massachusetts, which is the toy town. Oh my gosh, it's just a wonderful, wonderful organization that is now dementia aware. And then, of course, I have many others all across the United States. So, I will make time for you, and we can make the world dementia aware, which is so necessary, and we will all benefit from that. So thank you, Ryan, for allowing me to share this. I'm so honored to be here with you.
Yes, thank you for having us. I know the senior living communities that are listening got a ton of information from you. So yeah, Laura, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.